Okay, hello and good morning or good afternoon, everyone. It's really nice to see you after a short break. Not break, but you know probably from earlier communications that we've had some internal project-related changes. And before I kick off. With the objectives of today's session, I'd like to quickly ask Silvana Fumega, who stepped in as a program director for the GDB project, to introduce herself. Some of you who are part of the D4D network, you have met Silvana before, but most of our partners in the region have not. So I would really like to give her the opportunity to introduce herself and thank her for stepping in and taking over this role. Silvana, over to you in the first place, and we let
Yeah.
you go sleep. Uh,
First of all, apologies. My brain is not in the best shape right now after a long day, so I'm doing my best to try to speak in something similar to English. So, first of all, it's nice to see you. There's some of you I already know for a long time, and so some of you I'm just meeting. So, first of all, thank you to the team, Veronica, Nico, and David, that are working in strange hours. So thank you, first of all, for being here. And well, we are really excited. Like after several months of a huge work, we are getting into the field. And so we are testing all the work that is being done in previous months. So we are really happy about it. We know it's going to be a lot of work in the next few months for you and for us as well. But we are thinking that we are going to get a really good product at the end of the day. So we are hoping to be of assistance of anything that you need in the process. And basically that's it. Thank you for being here. And yeah, that's basically it. Veronica, to you.
yes, thank you. Thank you so much. And on the side of the GDB, as I said, we have Nico and we have David working with us today, and basically they are the ones doing most of the important pieces on the capacity building and guidance related to the data collection step-by-step process. But David, some of you may know David, but because he has joined one of the calls in December, if I'm not wrong, where he shared with us the lessons from the Open Data Barometer in Latin America that he coordinated last year. So David also stepped in a more active role in the GDB project. So David, would you like to briefly introduce yourself?
Thank you, Veronica, and good morning to all. As Veronica has been mentioning, my name is David. I am David. David's in Spanish, but as you wish. There's no other David here, so I don't think we will have any trouble identifying to whom you're referring to. Anyway, I live in Costa Rica, and right now I'm in Costa Rica. Here is 9 p.m. It's not actually that bad. um, but I'm happy to be with you. I've had already this type of calls with fellows or colleagues from other parts of the world, and have been meeting at sometimes late at night at my schedule. So I'm fine, and I'm happy to share with you this 3 hours we will be together. I think we will enjoy them a lot. It's going to be an interesting conversation. As Veronica mentioned, I jumped in and support the GDB team in the aspects related to these capacity development sessions and some other research aspects of the project, bringing on board some of this experience that we had last year implementing the OBD with 24 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. So I'm sharing some of those lessons with the team, and I'll be happy also to support you as much as I can today and also the days that will come after. Yes.
Super. Thank you. Thank you so much, David. And Nico, for those who have not met you before, Nico is also part of the GDB team.
Hello, my name is Nicolas. I am based on Argentina, as well as Silvana. I'm really pleased to meet you, all of you. And well, the idea of today is to have an overview on the methods and the structure that overlay this project and how are we thinking about it. So we are all in the same page and to be ready for going to the field. That I think that's the most exciting part of the project, getting the data that then we are going to analyze and we are going to learn from. And well, nice to meet you again. And I hope all of you and us enjoy this meeting.
Okay, super. Thanks. Thanks so much, Nico. Before we kick off, the traditional group photo, for those who don't know, we have every time, Manali probably, yeah, this is mostly about...
Do you have some Photoshop or something? Like, because maybe we need it this
yeah,
time.
I will do some...
That's the reason for the glasses as well. I mean, that's not because I'm not seeing you. Like.
So I would like to ask everyone to kindly open up the cameras so that we can, you know, we can take the group photo. This is also for the communications purposes. Those of you who follow us,
right?
Yes, Puroy, hello, good morning. Wonderful to have you with us. I hope you can see us.
Yes, you can.
Super, super. Wonderful to have you. If you are able to open up your camera, you are exactly in the moment when we are planning to take a group photo. So if that's possible on your end, fantastic. If
I
not,
prefer not to, thank you.
I understand if you are, okay. Okay, so I will just give you a sign, 1, 2, and at 3, be ready to keep your eyes widely opened. Just a second, let me check whether Puroy is able to do that. If not, I will try it later. So 2, 3. Okay, good. I hope it works. I hope it worked. But anyway, as I said, this is mostly for our reporting and communication purposes. Thank you so much for doing that. Okay, I will quickly share my screen so that we move to the you know, the session today. As Nico and David already mentioned, we are going to spend about 3 hours today, maybe less, depending on how many questions we have, how much deep dive we need to do. But before we do that, we introduced ourselves, but we would like to give everyone the chance to share who they are, the name, organization, and role they play in the organization. And when you do those introductions, please think about one most important ingredient from your perspective that is needed for a successful data collection phase, and one expectation from today's session. So name, organization, role that you have, one top ingredient for a successful data collection, and one expectation from today's session. I hope that's clear. I will stop sharing the screen so that we can see you. And please feel free to open up your mic and quickly let's do that round of intros and sharing about those things that I have just mentioned. Anyone? Kyril, you want to kick off? Sorry, I'm naming.
Okay, yeah. Kyril,
that happens when we know you for a while. I mean, you are the one that we are going to name.
Kyril, CNAM Project /OD Asia. I think the right ingredient is passionate researchers that care about what they're doing. The expectations from this is a clear understanding of you know, the support options we have when we have questions related to, you know, when we start undergoing this process.
Okay, okay, fantastic. And one expectation from today? From today's session?
Oh, I think that was the expectation, right? That yeah, I would have a clear, a clear support mechanism on, you know, when we start.
Okay. So you expect us to share about what kind of mechanism we may have there in place for them. Okay, super, super. Thank you. That's very useful. Okay, Benjamin.
Sorry, I mute myself. Hi everyone, I'm Benjamin Zhou from Internet Society Hong Kong chapter. I'm working on a project called Hong Kong Open Data Index. So based on our experience with researching for the Hong Kong Open Data Index in the past 2 years, I think the top ingredient for data collection is a clear definition of the data sets, because different people have different view of like what kind of data from a type of data set, for example, land data, what kind of land data we should look into. So and yes, this is also my expectation from this session today, and I look forward to working with you all too.
Super, thank you so much, Benjamin. I hope we are able to address that expectation. Scott, and thanks for joining.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Scott. I'm with the Pacific community in the Pacific Islands region. One of the sort of successful ingredients, I think, for good data collection is quality control. And I think that relates to the previous point from Ben about ensuring you have, passionate researchers who are committed to the cause, and making sure that you can eliminate errors and identify any sort of inconsistencies with the data collection at the time it's being undertaken. So I guess one of my expectations would be to learn more about the instruments themselves. I think you've heard me say that before, Veronica, just to really get a better insight into the types of questions for each of the modules, and how we go about implementing those. Thank you.
Okay, super. Thank you so much, Manali.
Hi, I'm based in India. I work with East West Management Institute. I think one of the ingredients to me for good data collection is transparency. I think it's important to share why data is being collected, even with the people are involved in sharing data, and especially being transparent with them. So I think that I would say transparency and expectations from this call. It's my first time here, so I'm very excited to be here. And I think, as Veronica had mentioned at the start of the call, I think just being on the same page and about the expectations of, and yeah, just getting to know everybody. I think that's my expectation from this call.
Super. Thanks so much. And I hope that whatever we do today helps you broaden the understanding of the, step-by-step process in a way that you are able to catch up with the rest of the colleagues on the call today. Okay, Feng?
Yeah.
Thank you. Feng?
So it's my expectation is to understand the broader structure of how exactly global data meter world works, and how the process will reflect the very interesting diversity situation in a country like China. Usually it's quite hard to use one city or one province status to reflect the whole nation's status. So we're still struggle with that. So it will be interesting to understand the methodology much in depth, and also trying to communicate it with potential reviewers, or as we previously discussed, a kind of public communication with other researchers, journalists, on how this methodology really reflects the real status of the nation.
Okay, thank you for this, Feng, and thanks for joining us. Puro, if you can hear and see us.
Hi, I'm Prue from the Open Development Initiative, and I'm based in Thailand. What makes good data collection successful would be connections. Specifically in the ASEAN nations where we work, there are a lot of nuances to the way data is being shared and disseminated, and it doesn't come from one source. And so I think good researchers are able to tap into different stakeholders who are
providing this information. So I think that's fundamentally key, is to have someone who's tapped into these networks locally. And then from my expectation, I'm looking forward to seeing how this is all going to be put together and structured, and hopefully find some systematic process on how we can implement it across the region, as we've got lots of countries to cover.
Super, that's very, very useful, and thanks for making it to the call, Puroi. And I'm really happy you are safe where you are now. For those who don't know, Puroi, she was based in Myanmar, and Myanmar, because of the situation on the ground, she had to relocate to Thailand. You said that's true? Thailand?
Yes, I'm in Thailand now.
Okay. That the most important is that you are safe where you are. Okay, super. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to share back my screen, and this is to kick off, you know, the real capacity building part. I think my suggestion at this moment is to try to make yourselves comfortable. Make sure you have a cup of tea or coffee or water next to you. Sit in take a relaxing position in a way that you know, it helps you know, engage and participate in a meaningful way. One reminder is on the chat function. Make sure to use the chat option for any immediate comments and reflections. And we want it to be as engaging, as participatory as possible. So don't wait for us to finalize, I don't know, bit parts of it. Make sure to just interrupt, open up your mic and ask for a clarification. That would be fantastic if you do that. In moving forward, I think the series of capacity building sessions that we are putting together basically have two main objectives. One is to support and guide regional hubs, and specifically regional coordinators, you working on behalf of the hubs on the GDB related project, and make sure that you have all the guidance and support needed. And with that, we hope that you will be equipped with everything you need in order to be able to conduct your capacity building sessions with national researchers. So we have those two phases. This week is basically the week during which we are running the capacity building sessions with all the regional hubs. This is the second capacity building session we are having this week. You may have seen from the earlier communications on the mailing list. And throughout May to end of May, June 14th, like mid-June, we really expect all the regional hubs to go through the same processes with their recruited researchers. And it doesn't matter how many researchers you have. Do you have one researcher or two or I don't know, 20? The most important thing is that every single researcher knows and understands what is expected of him, her, and how is the data collection process going forward. We will discuss about the logistics and some administrative related aspects. We will leave those for the last part of the session. You know, how do we get there? Before giving the floor to David and Nico for really the hands-on training on the processes and step-by-step of the data collection. This is just a brief summary of where we've been and where we are heading to. So we have slightly adjusted the general timeline for the project. In March, we have not. Basically in April, we have not convened any calls with the regional hubs. However, we have been going through the public review process of the research handbook, or the handbook, the GDB handbook. And I hope many of you managed to go through the handbook and have a look at those core modules that we had there, the snapshot modules, the thematic modules. We are no longer going to use fully those exact terms, because some of the things have changed, and as a result of the public review process, we made some adjustments. And David and Nico will walk you through those aspects. So March, we basically kept working on the handbook. In April, some of the hubs have completed the researcher recruitment process. We've been, as I mentioned, going through the public review process, finalizing everything. I know many of you were eager to have access to the expert survey and all of that stuff. So basically, we are here, and through the capacity building sessions, we are going to provide as much details and guidance about all the tools and all the processes. So basically in May we need to complete the research recruitment process and run all those capacity building sessions. June, from mid-June to August, we need to be doing the data collection, and the purpose of today's session is basically to cover that part. It's June to August. September is going to be focusing on data analysis and interpretation. And from October onwards, we will be working on the dissemination of the global report, but we are getting there. So the purpose of today's call is basically to cover the data collection phase. Very brief on some of the statistics that we had related to people who have been approached, or the number of stakeholders approached for the public review process. Just to give you an idea, more than 200 people have been directly contacted, and the handbook was shared with more than 200 people and organizations. And we have received up to 45 really relevant comments and feedback on the handbook. Some of the colleagues who were really active in providing comments were hubs across Europe. We had Transparency International share their comments and feedback on the handbook, specifically on the TI, on the PI public integrity module. We had good questions from UNFPA, from ODC D4D project, and some other independent experts and other organizations which are not necessarily part of the GDB network. The key tools and processes that the project has is, as I mentioned already, the research handbook, the expert survey, the government survey, the peer review and thematic review processes. So these are really the instrumental parts of the GDB. And today we will share with you about basically the expert survey, the peer review, the thematic review process, and making reference to, of course, to the guidance in the handbook, and mentioning the government survey, and you will see exactly where it comes in the process. With this, I would like to ask Nico. I will stop sharing my screen, or Nico, do you want me to keep sharing the slides on my end, or how would you prefer? Stop sharing mine?
Yes, I can share my screen.
Okay.
No problem.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Veronica. Well, before we begin, I would like to ask you if you have read the research handbook or any of the thematic modules that we have open for public review, just to have an idea of how much context do you have of the project itself and the methods in a particular sense. Have you had the chance to look at it?
Yeah, please feel free to open up your mics and share.
Yeah.
The
chat or in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
Some people yes, some people no. Okay, that's to have some knowledge on how was this. So
it's not a test.
Exactly. We need to know exactly how much details, how in depth we should go, so that everyone is really clear about everything. Okay, so
it's
we
not a
saw,
test yet.
Nico, we saw 3 no's in the chat at the moment. Okay, and Scott is saying,
yeah, right. I was
selected modules. Okay, so yes, there is limited.
Okay, that
okay.
makes sense.
Yeah, good.
Great. Perfect. So in the next few minutes, we are going to do a quick review of the main concept and objectives of the project that we think that are really important to have in mind in all the data collection phase. They are like broad and general concept that the objective and the aim of the methodology is that to reflect those concepts from the indicators. So it's all interrelated. Obviously, as Veronica mentioned, you can interrupt us anytime in the chat, raising your hand, speaking. The idea of these slides is to begin the conversation, not just to say our words, is to have an exchange with you and see what you think and to improve the collective knowledge for the data collection phase. So perhaps many of you know that the GDB is the successor of the ODB, the Open Data Barometer. And then previous year, there was a workshop that took place where a lot of stakeholders and people involved in the open data and data ecosystem met, and they were thinking how to update the Open Data Barometer. That is a tool that was created several years ago. So the idea was how can we update it to the current times. There are a lot of outputs from that meeting that we analyzed before developing the methods of the GDB, but I would like to highlight three main concepts that I think are very important. One is that the focus will not be just in open data. We are analyzing other data flows too. There is a huge focus on open data, but we are also exploring other forms of sharing and releasing data. Then another concept that came up there is like to have a more deep view on some thematic areas of data, what we call the data ecosystems. For example, analyzing in particular the political integrity data, the climate action data, land data, etc., in a more deep way that we are going to see in a few moments. And also a concern that was arised there is that the assessment in the Open Data Barometer had a lot of criteria of the researcher to assign the scores. So one of the objectives was to have a more structured method. So there are more checklists, the guidance is more structured than in the Open Data Barometer, as we are going to see in a few minutes. So these were some of the learnings and ideas that came up in that meeting that led all the development of the methodologies. And there are other things that we have in mind when developing the methodology, but also that we have to have in mind when doing the data collection, that the Global Data Barometer aims to be a new benchmark to assess in a country level data governance capabilities and availability. But the idea is not to be only a benchmark or a ranking. The idea is that every data that we get is useful and we can get applicable insights from them. And we are creating new knowledge. It's something that we don't have to forget, and everything that we collect is going to be useful to national policies, to researchers, to data advocates, etc. So those were a little bit the main concept, general concepts of how we start and how was thought the methodology of the GDB. Is there okay on your side? Any question, doubt?
Okay, thank you.
We keep going a little bit. Mm-hmm. So we have these objectives, we have these lines to follow. So the question is, how do we get there? And we are going to do also a quick review on the study design and the structure of the survey. So according to some of the concerns and ideas that were raised up by different stakeholders, we can sum up some of the design principles of the GDB. One is that it has to be sensitive to different government structures. There was a concern that the Open Data Barometer wasn't ranking so well countries that have federal systems because it only was looking for centralized data releasing or data governance. So now we have some elements to help that way. Also, the Global Data Barometer aims to be a global and universally assessment tool. So the countries that are well assessed, that are well ranked, is because all the population can enjoy, let's say, the ecosystem of data for public good, and there are no marginalized groups. And other idea, central idea on the design of the GDB is what we call the bright spots design, that even though we look for a universal or an inclusive practice, if there are practices that are isolated or that are like an outlier in the country, we can still track them and assess them to show them to the world. So these are three main principles that interact in the whole structure of the survey and the study and in the spirit of the project. So for example, just to mention one, this was what we were saying of this concept that then we see that appear in the concrete method that has been developed. You are going to find at the beginning of the survey a question that asks you which groups of people are marginalized in the country you are researching. Because we know that the ways in which people are marginalized in different countries in the world is different. It's not the same. Not every country has the same way that organized society. So first, the researchers are going to define that kinds of marginalizations that occurs in a country. And then the researcher will find some questions in the survey that ask about data and marginalized populations. And they have to know that that question on marginalized populations is asking about the precise marginalized group in that country that they have defined at the beginning. So this is one of the ways that you know that building a global tool is something that is complex because every country has its particularities. But with this kind of approach, we try to make it work for all the countries and not to have only one definition of, for example, inclusion or exclusion. So after this, let's say, framework, let's see how is built the GDB structure to reflect these ideas. So as we have been saying before, the GDB aims to track a broader concept than open data. And we have said that Global Data Barometer is tracking data for the public good. And we have broken down this concept in 4 pillars that are the core concept of the GDB, that are data governance, data capabilities, data availability, and use and impact. These are the 4 core components of the Global Data Barometer. Then we have other subcomponents that we are going to analyze and that are going to inform these main components. But to have a first approach to the methods, let's recall these 4 pillars of the Global Data Barometer. And as you can see in this image, in the green part at the top, it says national context, and then we have the sectoral practices that these are like the thematic lenses that we talked before. And what is the relationship between these 2 sections, let's say, of the Global Data Barometer? So this is what we call the modules of the Global Data Barometers. We have the core modules where we assess the data governance and capabilities throughout the whole country. And then we have the thematic modules that go deep in a sectoral data ecosystem. It could be land, political integrity, etc. And for each of these thematic data ecosystem, we capture sectoral data governance, availability, capabilities, and use and impact. Is it okay here how is the structure of the GDB with these 4 pillars of governance, capabilities, availabilities, and use and impact? So if there are no concerns, here is another way to understand it. You know, remember we have the core modules that assess a whole country, and we have said that there are two pillars here, data governance and data capabilities. And then we have the thematic models that we said is climate action, company information, health, land, political integrity. For each of these modules, we have indicators. And each indicator inform one of the pillars. We have indicators for data governance, indicators for data capabilities, indicator for use and impact, and for availability. So each indicator informs a single component. As we have seen here, these core modules, obviously the governance module has governance indicators, the capability module has capabilities indicators, but throughout the thematic modules, we have multiple kinds of indicators informing different pillars. So we have 13 governance indicators, 6 belongs to a core module and 7 to thematic modules, 5 capabilities, 4 in the core capability modules and 1 in thematic modules, 17 availability indicators that are all in thematic modules, and use and impact that are 4 in thematic modules. So far, so good. With
Nico, just for you to know, there's a question in the chat from Peru.
Great. I hadn't seen it.
Can you see it?
How do I cannot get to the chat when I'm sharing screen.
Let me ask Puro, do you want to share the question, Puro, with us?
Well, I posted it there because I didn't want to interrupt because it might get addressed later. But in terms of yes, I agree that you define marginalization in different countries differently, and different groups are marginalized in different ways. But the statistical presence within data doesn't necessarily reflect whether or not it reflects them. And it can be argued that a lot of data around marginalized communities is made up. It's literally made up. And this goes for Canada to Australia to, Southeast Asia to Myanmar, where people just aren't represented. I mean, it's marginalized people are not represented in data. So then how is that a factor in inclusivity if it's present in data or not, if you're not actually verifying whether or not it's representative of these communities? Like, are there indicators to also highlight this gap?
Sorry, I don't know if I get you well. The question is if it's useful to ask that because in some countries data is made up regarding these communities, or because there is no data regarding these communities?
Well, there's the two is possible. Data is made up by governments predominantly, and so it's not realistic. It's there to meet indicators. And then the second is that communities are not represented in total. And so there are two issues here, but what indicators are there within the barometer that would highlight these issues within government data or other data sets that highlight this gap or this problem?
Yes, well, one of the problems, the one that you are mentioning that perhaps they are not represented in data, is addressed with some of these indicators that ask if this data the data published by the government is taking into consideration these populations, are the particular problems that this population address or they have. And regarding that, the governments can make up data, and well, that's a more difficult one. There are elements that assess the quality and of the data set. For example, we have a reusable sub-question on missing data, or that could be that there is evidence that should be there and it's not there. But otherwise, then that's an interesting point. How do you assess the veracity of data? It's a good question. We can think about it throughout the process.
And just adding to that, I mean, one thing that, it could benefit this particular point is that there's going to be several thematic partners that are gonna provide their inputs. It's not that they're gonna know exactly what is going on in each country, but in some cases, the particular expertise that they have in a particular topic that maybe we don't know all of them, I mean, could also provide some insights together with the point of view of the researcher. So that could address some of them. I mean, it's still a problem, and we know that, and that's the reason that we are asking these kind of questions. But all the insight that the researcher can provide together with the thematic partners that could help at least to give a view of what is going on in a particular country.
Yeah, and it's also the researchers has a lot of place to add notes and comments and justifications and explain their research. And there could also be a good place to highlight if they see that there is a data available, for example, but it's not trustworthy for some reason. It can be noted there, and then it could be analyzed in the final analysis also.
Great. Yeah, I want to, that's why I didn't highlight, because there might be some questions in there that address this that we could potentially help to, and I think through a bit more in terms of, especially in the context in Asia here in the Mekong, very sensitive.
Yeah, there are no other questions at this point, Nico. Thanks, Puroi. Yeah, I think we can continue.
Okay, I hope we have addressed that, but we can go back later to keep discussing this issue that was it's very interesting. So what we were describing the 4 pillars and the core components of the GDB and the relationship with the indicators. So to have a quick review of what we talk about when we talk about data governance, we are looking for rules, processes, institutions that are in place to make data available for public good, and also to safeguard that data against any misuse that could occur. Then when we talk about capabilities, we are talking about if the country has the means, connectivity, skills, and institutional capacity to create, share, and use data for public good. We are going to use a lot of secondary data indicators for this, but there are still 5 indicators on the primary survey regarding capabilities. Then the data availability, that is the largest section of the primary survey, and that is mainly in the thematic modules, is to track if certain categories of data are available, shared, and in adequate quality to allow reuse for the public good. And then we have use and impact, where we track how and in what amount data is used for particular uses, and if it has had some impact through the country. So is there any question regarding this general structure? Remember our 4 pillars, the core module, the thematic modules, and also the principles of the design of the GDB. We will keep addressing this concept throughout today's meeting, but if there is some question that we could address.
I don't see any questions at the moment, Nico. I think if colleagues have questions, it's really, really great to either signal them right away, share about this in the chat, and we will get back to you. But I think, Nico, we are good to continue.
Okay, so at this stage, I could give the word. You say give the word in English? It's in Spanglish. That I would say that David comes here and take the stage.
Thank you, Nico. Let me continue with the presentation, sharing my stuff here. Okay, great. Could you just please confirm that you can see the presentation?
Yes. I can
Perfect.
see.
Great. Okay. So in this part, I will describe the process that we will be following in the next weeks, starting from today, actually. But I will be describing the main steps and the main activities that we will be following in order to proceed with the research process. So this figure here we have, it shows the flow of the activities that we need to conduct in order to do all the data collection and make sure that we do it right. So the first box you can see here on the left is the capacity building. So that's how we start the research process. And we start in the capacity building with these sessions with you as coordinators. And in a few days, you will be conducting your sessions with the researchers. And the objective of the sessions is for us, for all the team to get prepared and be capable to have the knowledge and the capacities to do the data gathering. When we finalize those data collection, when we finalize the capacity building, then we move to this second box here that you can see. It says research mini testing. This is actually a very important activity, and it's the first activity that we do when we start collecting the data. And here, what we are asking you to do is to coordinate with your national researchers to do some testing with 2 questions from the expert survey. So the survey has the indicators, and those indicators have sub-questions. We are asking you to work with 2 specific indicators and the questions that make that indicator, and request your national researchers to answer those 2 indicators, and only those indicators. When you start, when they finalize the answering of those 2 indicators, we are asking you as coordinators to review, deeply review the responses they're providing, and provide them also feedback based on the responses. We need to review some aspects in terms of how, if they're completing the expert survey instrument in the proper way, and there are some things that must be addressed there. But then you also need to check whether they are collecting good data sources, and if they are answering in the right way the questions of the indicators. After you provide the feedback, the national researchers can make the corresponding changes. And if you believe they have addressed those changes in the right way, then they can move to the research development. So here what they do in this third box basically is they continue completing the rest of the indicators and the rest of the questions. While they do that, the coordinators will be doing these research spot checks. So here is where you as coordinators make sure that the national researchers are progressing in terms of the time they have available. And also you do some overview of some specific indicators and some specific questions, just to check that everything is going in the right way. Then we have this other box here that says data collection completion. And here is basically when the national researchers finalize answering all the indicators and all the questions that those indicators have. And you as coordinators can verify that the expert survey has been completed. Once the expert survey is completed, then we move to the reviewing stage of this research process. And as you can see in the figure, there are 2 types of reviewing that we have in the process. The first one is the peer review. So in the peer review is where we're having someone looking at all the indicators and all the questions that have been answered by the researchers. There are some recommendations that we will address there to guide you on how to do that. But the idea is to have a validation of the research that has been conducted, and then we have the thematic review. The thematic review is where the GDB partners will
not only from the country that they're from, but also regionally. So I was just wondering, you know, it might be of value for them to also contribute cross-sectorally if they have the scope and the time to do so. So I was just wondering if they have access to multiple countries or just their country specific.
There is they can have access in the peer review stage. We will describe about the peer review in a minute. Yeah. So, but there's a way that we can take value from this point that you're mentioning in the peer review. I think it can work. But we'll explain it in a few minutes, and then we'll see if we completely answer your question. Okay, good. Is there any other questions? Because
Oh, yes, I have a questions. I have two questions that actually is one is more generic and another is more practical. So the generic question is about the involvement of the GDB team versus the regional hub. So can I say that all the work before the peer review is inside the regional hub, and GDB's involvement only starts after the peer review stage? And the practical question is that for a regional hub like Hong Kong, we pretty much stand alone. So I saw that in the survey questionnaire, you have different roles. So you have a research, you have a coordinator. Well, for the case in Hong Kong, so pretty much we are like all one person in all these roles. Yes, I can assign the research work to another researcher, but I prefer like I do it myself first because I'm more familiar with the context. So that's the practical question.
So the first question.
The first question is like which stage you will get involved.
The GDB team.
Yeah,
gets involved. Yeah. So we also have an answer about that in the. We have some slides with details about the process, and I think we will address that question there. But basically the hub is the one that coordinates the whole process within the countries that belong to the hub, of course, with all the support from the GDB team that you may need. But I will explain it. I'll explain it with more details in a few minutes. Nico, you want to address the one about the survey tool?
Yes, from a technical point of view, there is no problem, but we need a review. We need someone reviewing that survey for a quality check, let's say.
I think we were discussing at some point that Benjamin, you could for the peer review, you could work with Feng in China. You know, where the research, your survey, for example, is being checked, peer reviewed by the researcher in China, and the researcher in China does this for the expert survey of Hong Kong. So there is probably a possibility to do that exchange at that level, but we need to discuss about what works best in that particular context. But every single expert survey needs to go through a peer review process for quality assurance.
Sure. I mean, like at which stage we do this cross-track between, like, for example, like Hong Kong and China, the peer review, right?
These are really relevant questions. It's fantastic that you raised them, because what David will take us through right now is in-depth details about every single stage that he listed and he shared briefly about. So it's great to know that you have those questions, and now let's deep dive a little bit into those. And if that is still not clear, we will stop and discuss it further. But thank you very much for raising.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Just a general consideration, even though, I mean, the work and the process that David is going to explain now, I mean, you can come back to the core team of the GDB anytime that you need any support. So we are going to be there to support any part of the process, even though the research part in the particular countries are being coordinated by the hub, but we are going to be there to provide any support that you need. For example, in thinking about how to do the peer review where there's only one country per hub. So don't worry about that. But now I'm going to let David continuing with the process.
And
sure,
I wanted
to
share, Silvana, that we have, yes, this is very good. Thank you for raising it, because we have some other standalone countries in the GDB. And this question did not come up previously. So thank you so much for this.
Okay, great. So what I want to do now is explain a little bit with some more details the content or the activities that should be taken within each of these boxes here of the process. So in the first one is about the capacity building, and this is, I think here is very straightforward. What we want in the capacity building sessions, these first ones we're having with you, with coordinators, is to guide you and support you with basic understanding on the GDB, on the structure, on how it works, on the instruments that we're going to use, the expert survey, the process, to make sure that you have the capacities, the understanding, and the tools to orientate the process in your region, in your hubs, and also to make sure that we also provide you with the tools for you to deliver the capacity building sessions with the national researchers. So then we have the sessions with the researchers that here you will be taking the lead, but as Veronica has been mentioning, we have a package of some materials that we will be sharing with you in order to support you with this process, with the training. When we move to when we finalize these capacity building sessions, then we have our teams ready to start doing the data collection. So the data collection starts with what we are calling this mini testing, this research mini testing. This is a very, very important activity within the process, because here is where we work on the consistency issues of this data collection. You can imagine that maybe because of the researcher's background or their previous experiences, or maybe because the limitations of information that is available in some countries, all these reasons can guide the researcher to complete the survey in some way that may be different from another researcher. So to try to face that situation, we are working in this mini testing from the very, very beginning to try to guide as much as possible the researchers to do to do their job in the most standard way as possible. So the mini testing is actually the tool or the process that we're doing to work on that. In the mini testing, what we're specifically are doing is asking the researchers to only answer 2 indicators from their expert surveys. So once we start the data collection, they have access to their expert surveys, but within all the indicators, we're only going to ask them to complete only 2 indicators initially. 1 indicator from the governance core module, and 1 indicator from one availability indicator from a thematic module. That's our recommendation. All researchers should work with the same indicators. So you as coordinators have a little more easiness to provide feedback. So what type of feedback we are going to provide, or what are we going to review when we look at the responses of those indicators? Once the researchers finalized completing those 2 indicators and the sub-questions that, that the indicators have, we are going to look at the surveys and check the surveys in 2 main aspects. The first aspect is related to the form of the survey. And here we are just checking that all indicators questions are complete. So there's no question that is blank. We make sure about that. We will make sure that the researchers are using the survey tool properly with all the different tools that the survey tool has. Nico will also explain with more detail in a few minutes about the survey tool. We need to check that that comments are short and clear. Comments, justification, these places where the researchers write down their ideas, we will make sure that they are short and they're clear. And we will also conduct some basic English proofreading. So the survey has to be completed in English. The sources that they collect, they can be in their languages, but the completion of the expert survey has to be done in English. And we need to make sure that the English that is written in the survey tool is understandable, is good enough for anyone to understand what has been written. So there's some basic English proofreading that has to be taken. So these are the 4 aspects that we will be checking in terms of form. And if there are limitations, or if one of them is not being completed in the right way, then we as coordinators will provide the researcher with a specific feedback in terms of where is their weakness, okay? The other aspect we check from this mini testing is the substance. And basically what it is done in the substance is basically we validate the sources, that the sources are correct, and we check the answers. That the answers also seem to be correct, that the answers are connected with the sources, and so the response or the answer is correct. If we see something that maybe is not connecting properly or is not making the right sense to us, also we will use the survey tool and provide feedback to the researcher so the researcher can make adjustments. So if you see, if we provide this type of feedback to all researchers, what we're doing is working on the consistency of the completion of the expert survey from here on, like from this moment on, with the rest of the indicators and with the rest of the questions. The researchers will have to address the comments and the feedback that you as coordinators are providing, right? You as coordinators will check that the researchers are making the changes and the improvements that correspond. You will validate that they're doing it. If they're not doing it, you need to extend, maybe explain a little bit more, or ask them to make the changes as you're suggesting, as it's required, maybe as is an aspect that is required from the methodology, or something that's required because of this consistency issue we're talking about. Anyway, the point here is that you as coordinators need to make sure that researchers are reacting in the right way to the comments and the feedback that you are providing. Researchers will continue with the rest of indicators and the rest of questions once you have confirmed as coordinators that they are ready. You will provide them with a green light, and they can proceed with all these recommendations that they received. They would take those in consideration when answering the rest of indicators and the rest of questions. So that is the main point. We think this is an important, a very, very important stage. So if there are some findings or some results or some lessons that you identify from this stage, you as coordinators, we're asking you to kindly share some of those or all of those with us, with the GDB team, so we can also learn from the process and maybe make some improvements if they are also needed in terms of the methodology or the survey tool or so on. Okay, that's pretty much the process for this research mini testing. I don't know if you have any question related to it, or if there's something, if it's clear. I don't know. Mm-hmm.
Let's check. I don't see any questions or heads up, but okay, all good.
Okay. Yeah, feel free to open the mic if you want. If you want to address a question about it. If not, I am understanding that it is clear.
Yeah. Move forward.
Okay. Good. So then, once the research mini testing is finalized, so we continue with the research, right? So in the research, the researchers will continue answering, as I've been saying, they will continue answering the indicators and the questions of each indicator. So as part of the research, the researchers have to answer all the questions from the expert survey. All the questions, they are answered with yes, partially no, or a similar scale. Some questions may have a slightly different scale, or maybe one more point from scale. Anyway, the survey will provide the details of how to answer. And according to the answer, let's say if there is a yes answer, the survey tool will specifically ask, let's say, a complementing piece of information related to that response. And of course, that information has also to be completed in the expert survey. So there is this the answers have to be complemented by these supporting question boxes that the survey tool has, and that they are related to the yes, partially, no, or similar scale answer that has been provided. There are no blank or null answers in the survey. If a question assesses a variable or asks about something that the researcher considered that does not apply to that person's country, then the answer to that question is still no. But if that's the case, the researcher will have the opportunity to provide some extra information in the survey tool, and will also have the opportunity to write down some notes on the research journal, where that is in a specific space that the survey tool has, that collects information from the research process that does not become public. Let's say it's information that is valuable for us, that we're working on the research, that helps maybe understanding you as coordinators some decisions maybe that the researchers are taking, or the process or the steps that they have taken, and that will also be valuable for the reviewer when the reviewer comes in and looks at the different responses. So yes. The survey tool also has a guidance, let's say a specific guidance for indicators and the sub questions. So those are also available in the research handbook. The important thing here is that researchers must look at these definitions and this extra guidance that is provided for each indicator, because some of them have, let's say, some rules or recommendations in order to respond to that indicator and the questions that that indicator has. So this is a very important aspect that has to be reviewed by the researcher when they are also completing the expert survey. And of course, as part of the research development, the researchers must carefully control their progress over time, because the expert survey has an important amount of indicators and sub questions. So they need to progress properly throughout the time, and maybe not wait to the end, because maybe there will be a lot of work to do, and maybe the quality will be in some level of risk. and we don't want that to happen. So researchers have to put a lot of attention also in the progress within the time they have available. Okay, so that's what happens when we're doing this data collection. Is there a question there so far? Again, feel free to write it down or raise your hand or open the mic. No, if no, I'm also understanding that is clear, and I can explain the research spot checks. Okay, so the research spot checks.
David, just a second. I think we have it's more on the tools. Is there a dashboard overview for missing questions? So that's a question from Kyril.
I think Nico,
yeah,
the survey tool offers that, right?
Yeah. Are we talking about a question that has not yet been answered by the researcher? Is that the definition of missing question?
Yeah, because basically I think for OD Asia we have like 10 countries. It'll be hard for me to see, like, you know, which ones haven't filled the question or something. So some sort of overview.
Sure. We will also share with you some instructions to use what we call the control sheet, where you manage the different surveys assigned to different countries. And there you will have some cells. It's a spreadsheet. You will have some cells with the percentage of questions that are in the complete status or reviewed. So you will have a clear sense of where are the researchers.
Okay, good. So while researchers are working in their expert surveys, they're doing the research, they're completing the questions. While that's taking place, there is this activity named as research spot checks that in parallel is going on. And this activity is actually something that the coordinators do, okay? So the research spot checks is basically when coordinators checks three main things. I will tell you about those three main things. The first one is you as coordinators should be checking the researcher's progress. So previously I mentioned that the researcher has to pay a lot of attention and control their own progress, but we should also do it as coordinators. Again, we need to make sure that all researchers meet the deadlines. So we should, let's say, be monitoring the researchers' progress maybe about 2 times a week, just to make sure that they're having progress with their surveys. If there is any issue, maybe you will notice from that maybe that one researcher is lagging behind, and then what you should do then is contact the researcher and maybe check if everything is going fine, or if there's an issue or something, and try to work that together in order to the researcher to continue with their work. Okay. If there is a higher, let's say, a problem that is maybe a little more difficult to address, we are asking you to inform the GDB team, so we can look at the situation and try to work it together. So if you see, the point here is that we are not waiting until the end of the data collection period. Let's say we're having this month to do the data collection, so we're not expecting to have this let's say the last 2 days, this type of feedback. If you are doing if you're checking the progress, then let's say from the first week you may be identifying that some researchers maybe are lagging behind. So the point is to be addressing this through the different let's say the weeks that we have available. Okay, the other thing that has to be taken care in the spot checks is to check a little bit more about the form and substance of the responses, similar to what has been done in the mini testing. But here, of course, you as coordinators will not do it in all indicators. maybe just in some of them, and maybe in some questions. So we know that when you are looking at the researcher's work, you may identify that maybe some specific questions are showing some difficulties for the researchers for them to answer, or maybe some confusion or things like that. When you identify that, then the spot check becomes relevant to those specific questions. So you check how they're answering those questions and provide them with feedback in order to orientate them and trying to solve this maybe these challenges that maybe some specific questions are showing. Okay. And maybe you can also do some random selection of questions, and just to see how the researchers are completing those questions. Again, the idea is to check those responses in terms of form and also in terms of substance. But as you can see here, the point is that you just do it with a few. But you do it also to make sure that the surveys are being completed in the proper way. And if they're not, we are flagging the researcher, let's say, with sufficient time for this person to make the changes that this person should do. Okay, so this is the other aspect about the spot checks. And the third one is some more English proofreading. So here we want to also make sure that the comment boxes, the justification, the different places where the survey allows the researchers to write down some information, we want to make sure that that's understandable. So you should also conduct some English proofreading and give feedback to the researchers if it's needed. The survey tool allows you to have access as editor to the surveys. Maybe if you identify that there is a very simple thing to correct from, let's say, one sentence or one paragraph, you can directly do that. And the survey tool allows you to do that. If you believe that maybe is maybe a little something that requires a little more of work, then what you should do is write down a comment using the survey tool and ask the researcher to address maybe that specific question and improve, let's say, the way that has been the information that has been written down. Okay, so those are the three aspects about the spot checks. Any question there? Mm-hmm. No? Good. Okay, so
yeah, I don't see any questions, but
okay.
Just wondering, is really everything clear? Can we move ahead, or just remember, if you still have some questions coming up on any of these processes, make sure to intervene at any point or leave them in the chat so that we don't miss those. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, great. So when the researchers have completed their expert surveys, you as coordinators have been conducting the spot checks. Let's say the researchers recognize that they have addressed those recommendations, then they use the survey tool and send the survey to you as coordinators for you to make to check that everything is completed. So here you do, let's say, a final review to make sure that everything is properly addressed, that there are no blank responses, that everything is completed, has been addressed, and if that's the case, then the data collection has been completed, and then the survey is ready to move to the next stage, which is the reviewing. The reviewing stage. Remember, there are two ways we are reviewing. I'll explain that in a minute. Also, something that we are thinking that is relevant at this stage is that you do some let's say some reflection of what has been what you have learned from these data collection stages let's say in the past weeks, and maybe you write down, let's say, just maybe a few or some learned lessons that will become very valuable for you as Hub, and also for us as GDB team. And we are asking to kindly share some of those lessons with us related to this data collection stage. Okay. And then the survey moves to the reviewing, right? So we have the peer review and the thematic review. Now let me explain the peer review first. Basically, there are two approaches on which the peer review can be taken. Okay, so the first approach is where the national researchers act as reviewers, and this is actually the recommended approach. This is the way we are recommending. And here, connecting to the question we had earlier, is when we have the opportunity to have, let's say, some researchers with knowledge about other countries, for instance, and understanding, then it will be great to maybe assign that country to that researcher to conduct the peer review, so we can have let's say, a more quality reviewing of that country and that expert survey, and more quality responses. In this approach, the coordinator does is to assign to each national researcher one expert survey from another country, so that researcher can review that full expert survey. We are recommending this approach because you do not need to invest time. So the reviewers do not need to invest time understanding the methodology, the structure of the GDB, the questions, the answering rules, how the information is being collected, the survey tool, and like all these aspects. So the reviewers can directly jump into the content analysis and provide valuable feedback from the, let's say, from the first moment. So that's one approach. That's one way the peer review can be approached. The other way is where you as where the regional hubs can have one or more reviewers when you have funds available to do this a specific review of questions, of indicators and questions. So this is maybe one person looking at all the expert surveys that have been completed in your hub. So if you have the budget available, then this might be another approach for you to follow. But you will need to prepare this reviewer in terms of the different aspects, not only about using properly the survey tool, but understanding, making sure that the reviewer understands the GDB concepts, the structure, and all these aspects. Okay. Let me explain a little bit more the process itself, how the peer review process looks like. So you can see that the process starts when the expert surveys were completed, right? So what happens after that is that the coordinators, what the coordinators do is they distribute the expert surveys between the different researchers, right? This is what we have mentioned previously. The coordinator also provides instructions on how the reviewing will be conducted, what specifically things have to be reviewed, what is the time frame that is available, and all those instructions are provided. And then the reviewers start doing their work, right? They access the expert surveys and they provide comments and feedback to the indicators and questions. The reviewers, you see here, the reviewers have an extra input that might be available for some countries, and is the government survey. So reviewers can also have access to the government surveys to the answers of the government surveys and use that as maybe some orientation while they're doing the reviewing, and maybe ask, let's say, or address specific recommendations based on that for the researchers. When the reviewers finalized looking, they finish looking at the indicators and the questions, then the survey goes back to the researchers. So the researchers can work on those recommendations they received, okay? Researchers address the feedback, and then the survey goes back to the reviewers. So the reviewers can make sure that the feedback has been attended, that the feedback has been addressed. If that was done correctly, then the reviewer finalizes the peer review process, okay? But there might be the case that maybe the researcher addressed the comments or the recommendations for some questions, but maybe not all of them, or some of them are not were not addressed. So if that's the case, the reviewer will send the survey back to the researchers, so the researchers can finalize with those, let's say, with those comments that maybe were not properly addressed. In these cases, it will be maybe convenient that the reviewers add a little more specification, maybe a little more orientation, so the researchers understand properly what is the recommendation they're receiving. They address those recommendations, and then the survey goes back to the reviewers, and if everything is fine, then the reviewing process is completed. If not, then this can go again and follow that process. So as you can see, there is this back and forth is very valuable in terms of let's say improving some specific aspects of the expert survey. While this back and forth is going on, the coordinators need to monitor and participate when it's necessary. So it's very, very important that you as coordinators check and monitor these conversations that are happening between reviewers and researchers. To maybe provide some orientation. They might be asking for orientation, so you can jump into the conversation and provide that orientation. Or maybe they are not solving the problem. Maybe one person has one position and the other has another position, and they cannot agree. So that also may happen, and you as coordinator should jump in and orientate on how to solve that specific situation, maybe with one very specific question. Okay, so this is the specific activities that you as coordinators should be conducting, but it's pretty much in the connected to what I have already explained. So you as coordinators identify what national researchers in a better position to review in a specific country. You use that as an input for making this cross mechanism where all researchers receive a country to review. You do that distribution, and you inform the researcher what country that researcher will be reviewing. You grant the access in the expert survey, so the reviewer can access the survey of the country they are reviewing. You share the instructions, you monitor the progress of the reviewers. This is also something important. We need to make sure that all expert surveys receive this review and these comments. So it's not permitted, let's say, that a reviewer does not do the reviewing of the expert survey that person received. So you should monitor that they progress properly also in the reviewing activities. Intervene, as I mentioned, when it's necessary, and mediate also when it's necessary. You should also monitor the tone and language of the comments. This is something that is taken in a very professional way. So it might not be the case, but still maybe you should check whether it's necessary to intervene, let's say, if there is an issue related to tone or language. You check that the feedback is marked as resolved or attended once that happens, and send the survey to completion. When the peer review process finished, then the peer review can be sent to completion. Okay. These are the very specific instructions that should be provided to the reviewers. So they read the government survey responses when it's available and use that as orientation. The reviewers should start by reading the research journal and check the research steps that were followed while answering one specific indicator. And after that, then the reviewer can look, let's say, at the details of the questions and responses. That is, looking at the sources, looking at the comments, looking at the answers, making sure that the answers seem correct. Pay attention to the use and impact indicators, also some attention to the availability indicators, since these indicators are slightly different. So pay attention to those. Also confirm that there are no blank responses. This has been already, let's say, addressed by coordinators, but maybe there's still something they're missing. If that's the case, the reviewer will point it out. And of course, write feedback when it's necessary. So you write, the reviewer writes down the recommendations for the researcher. Okay, so that's the peer review process. Again, feel free to open the mic and make a question if you have one related to the peer review.
Yeah, let's see. Is everything super clear? Is it so well described and detailed that there are no questions? I just want to highlight once again that you will have access to all this guidance. So you will have access to the slide deck, to additional guidance, to, I hope, all the video recordings from all the capacity building sessions that we are going to have. Yes, you are not alone, and you will have a sufficient level of details to be able to use that guidance in your work with national researchers. But please feel free to open up your mic and ask anything that may not be clear at this point in terms of how the peer review process is taking place. Maybe David, from your experience, and I was wondering about this during the first capacity building session. So basically, it's at the discretion of the regional hub or regional coordinator to decide who reviews what country. In your previous ODB related work, what kind of tips or guidance did you use in your? Is it the expertise of the researcher? Right. Is it his or her interest in a specific country? Is it country-based expertise? And what if none of this exists?
Right. So there were different things that I took in consideration. So this is me working as coordinator last year for the Open Data Barometer implementation we did in Latin America and the Caribbean. We had 24 countries, so that was so there were 24 researchers that we had in that implementation, and I was coordinating the job of all these national researchers. So when we did the peer review, we followed this process, and I used, let's say, different a set of different criteria to do this cross mechanism, like to select to select a researcher to review in a specific country. So the first thing was that when we recruited the researchers, we asked them if they had, let's say, a preference for another country they could do research on. So there was a primary country they were going to do research on, basically the country they belong to. That was not exactly the case, maybe in the 100% of situations, but we clearly knew from the very beginning which country each researcher wanted to do research on. But we also asked if there was a second and a third country that they will be interested in doing research on. So maybe that's something you as coordinators can ask. If you don't have that information, you just simply can write them an email, or if you have a chat, let's say WhatsApp chat, a Telegram chat, or something like these tools that whatever you believe it is better in your case, but you can ask them to maybe identify let's say a second country they could do research on, and that is maybe because they know about the country, they maybe have done research on that country previously, or other reasons. I would recommend you do that maybe private. Let's say it's you send a general email but you collect the responses individually, so you know how you would distribute them, but not maybe the researchers are aware of who is reviewing their specific country, just to avoid any bias that may be going on. Let's say if that information is disclosed, we just don't want to open that door. Maybe nothing happens, but maybe it's preferable if you keep it closed. So that's something that we took in consideration. Another thing we took in consideration was that we had academics and we had practitioners. So we had people from civil society and we had people from the academia as researchers. So when we also did this, we tried, let's say that the research, let's say if the researcher was from the civil society, we tried to have a reviewer from the academia. So that person receives, let's say, some type of extra recommendations, and that turned out actually very, very good in the experience that we had last year. So that's another thing that you can consider. There are other aspects like language. In this case, like we didn't have that problem because, let's say, Latin American countries all speak Spanish, and the Caribbeans they worked in English. So basically, we just crossed the researchers within the regions. So we didn't have an issue related to languages. But now we let's say in your hubs you might have that. So language also is something that you can consider. Similarities in terms of let's say also the governance models of the countries, right? There might be some federal countries or more centralized countries, or countries that are very large, others very small. Like these are other aspects that you may consider. So at the end, we didn't have just only one condition. We mixed some of them, and it ended up very well.
Super. Thanks much, David, for this additional insights. I think I don't see any other questions or hands up, so maybe we
okay,
with thematic review.
I'm close to finalize this activity. So then the thematic review, yes. The thematic review is where the GDB partners will have access to the data in two complementary ways. So there are two ways they will have access to the data. So the first way is that the partners will have access to the expert surveys, but only as readers. So they will not specifically comment anything on the survey tools, on the expert survey of one specific researcher. They will have access to it, but just as readers. So they can look at let's say their module of interest. Let's say well, they have access to the whole survey, but they will probably, of course, they will just focus on their module of interest. And with that access, maybe they look at specific questions, maybe specific indicators or specific questions, or some countries, specific countries. Anyway, they will have that access for them to, let's say, identify some, let's say, common issues, if there are some common issues, or maybe some specific recommendations. But and that's a way, that's one way they are having access to the data. The other way is that the GDB team will aggregate some of that thematic data. For example, the average score of each indicator and each question, and they will complement that by looking also at the surveys. And with that information, if they wish, they will provide us with a document with some observations. They will share that document with the GDB team, and the GDB team will later share it with the coordinators. If the GDB team believes that some extra notes are needed, then we will provide those notes. The coordinators will have the document with those recommendations, and then the coordinator will forward that to the researchers. So the researchers will have some of time to look at the recommendations that are coming from the thematic partner, check if they apply to them. If they do, then the researchers should address those comments and make the corresponding improvements. But as simple as that, as straightforward as that, that's how the thematic review will be taking place. And then when the reviewing finalizes, then the research process is then completed. The coordinator needs to make sure that all questions have been answered and all the reviewers' feedback is marked as closed. So when the reviewer writes a comment for the researcher, there's a bubble box that appears with a green color, and when that has been resolved, then that bubble box changes to another color. It's purple, and that means that comment is closed, so that situation is closed and it has been addressed. So we need to make sure that everything that came up from the reviewing is marked as closed. If something is missing, then the coordinator should ask the researcher to close that pending situation. And once that finalizes, then the coordinator can close the process and finalize the whole data collection process, and then the surveys can be ready to move to the next stage, which is the data processing. And that's it. That's the whole research process with the different stages and activities that should be taking part in each one of them. I don't know if there's any other question or one question, extra question or something, comment.
Let's see. No questions, no comments or reactions. Okay.
Clear as water.
Either, as they say, either it's super clear or nothing is clear. So I hope it's the first case.
Yeah, I see Carol, and he has his. I see his face, and
yeah, he's giving us very.
He's happy. He's happy. So I'm thinking that everything is clear.
Yeah, Kyril is sending lots of positive body language feedback. I highly appreciate Zoom feedback. Okay, super. Okay, but as I said, at any point in time, make sure to stop us and intervene. Okay, maybe you need to get a little bit of time, to digest and process that. We also understand and are aware of the, how overwhelming it also may be from the perspective of the stages. But just to remind you, this is something that needs to take place within June to August. And I think there is a clear slide that David shared with the timeline. So when exactly happens what? And that is the timeline that we will share with you all, so that you make sure you keep pace with those deadlines. Okay. Yes, let's, if there are no any comments or reactions to this. Okay, Scott. Scott, would you like to open up your camera and mic? And it would be fantastic to hear and see you, and not only us talking.
Yeah, sure. Sorry. I've written in my question and comment, and I think you've probably heard me say this a lot. I don't know at what stage of the process we'll get access to. I mean, we saw some examples from screenshots of the tools, and I got to say, like, this is something that would really provide a little bit more clarity and help us from our end on recruitment, because we've had some opposition. And without going into all the detail, if we can't see how much is involved in each of these modules, we cannot get somebody to, you know, we've got a lot of hoops and administrative hurdles to go through there. So I'm still not clear on, you know, we've talked about the different core modules. We've talked about the thematic modules, all of which I think are probably very relevant, and particularly in our part of the region of the world. But some may be a little bit politically sensitive. And I don't know what the snapshot modules, you know, can we just get a feel for which ones are all of them going to be included? At what point can we access them? And you know, if they're all ready to go and we could get access, that would be really great. And if not, when would that likely to be happening? Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Scott. I don't know, Nico, how do you want to go about it? Because I think there are different modalities to show that. If the handbook, if the online version of the handbook is, you know, the final version that we have now, we can go into that and share exactly, you know, the final list of indicators, what's in it. So that would be one approach that we can take, and any of us can share the screen and go through that. Or depends on what do you think is the best modality to make clarity.
Yeah.
I think the number of indicators, the final number of indicators, how big is the survey? This is something that is really of importance here.
Sure. I have pasted in the chat the final modules. Those are the thematic modules, then the governance and the capabilities that are the core modules. And we have in total 39 indicators. And so if you see what we have open for public review, you may have a sense of how long would take each indicator. And we also, we have now, according to the feedback, we have made some adjustments. And in the first days of the next week, we can share with you how it would look like the whole survey. But because we are finishing to adjusting something from those comments. But I think, do you think that this information that I give you of the final themes and the final number of indicators is useful for you?
Yeah, I think I've seen some of these modules and the development of them. Yeah, I don't know if it's going to be really that useful without actually seeing the questions that are being asked. You know, are they available, or are only some of the modules finished? I'm sorry that I'm cutting straight to the point, but to us, I'm a statistician, and that's sort of, you know, we deal with the instruments all the time, and that's why it gives us a better understanding of the workload. It gives us a better understanding of what's viable for us, and so that's really where I'm coming from.
It's right. We are not opening, like releasing the last version because it's not the last version. But if you need it, we can tomorrow, for example, or today here, yes, in a few hours, to share with you the full list of indicators and the question that involves. And I think that it will not be the last version because we are taking the feedback still, but we have like tiny things. So we will have like the almost final version.
Yeah, that would be great. So how many modules are we doing then of the ones that I just listed? So we've got all of the snapshot modules, all the core modules, and all the thematic modules are included in the GDB baseline.
We have the ones that I have pasted. We have the governance and the capabilities core modules. Then we have the climate action, company information,
okay. Yeah,
health,
mm-hmm.
Land,
okay,
political integrity, that is the largest one,
okay,
public finance, and public procurement.
So those what 8? Those are the ones that are complete, and the other ones will be being completed. Is that correct?
No, that's the the ones that are going to be piloted in this edition.
Okay, right, okay.
There are, yeah, that's a very good question, because for the public consultation, there were much more thematic modules.
Yeah.
But for a matter of the amount of research that would be needed, and
yeah.
It was flagged that perhaps it wasn't going to be feasible for all the hubs and the researchers. So this is also a very good opportunity to pilot how long will take it to do this edition that is like
even that last comment gives me a lot more clarity. That actually helps enormously, because we had the impression that it was including all of the listed modules, and now that I'm a bit clear on that, so I can actually put a bit of a frame around this. So thank you.
Right. No, yes, one important feedback that we got from the open consultation was that it could be a little bit, I don't know the word in English, but challenging in says to carry on all that survey with the planification that was done. So we took that into consideration, and for this pilot edition, we have made a conscious frame of the themes that we are piloting, that we are carrying on the research, and it's we have like half of the indicators that we have open for public consultation.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, so yes, and I think it's important to know that currently there are 39 indicators in total. There were much more in the beginning, at the beginning of the public review process. We are approaching also differently the snapshot module. So Nico mentioned exactly those that are staying. So basically those are the modules for which we primarily have thematic partners, and most of the snapshot modules will not end up in the pilot edition. Correct me if I'm wrong, Nico, which is why we are still not there with a final version of the expert survey, because that's something we need to still discuss internally. Okay. Nico, you want to?
Sorry, I just this is the figure actually that shows the modules. So the two core modules, the governance and capability, the two core modules, and then the 7 thematic modules.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe it's a little bit confusing because we still have the snapshot modules in the handbook, in the online version of the handbook.
Yeah, but we are updating it now.
Okay. Okay. Yes. Are there any other questions or comments before we? Nico, you want to take us through the survey? Once again, or let me just see if there are any other questions. Okay. Yeah. No, I don't see any hands up. I think we are good to move ahead.
Okay. Anyone needs to get a glass of water or anything like that, or we move
Actually,
ahead?
yes. If thanks for reminding. Do you agree to take a 5 minutes break? You don't disconnect. You don't leave the meeting. Just turn off your camera and mic. And let's just indeed, thanks Nico for this. Let's have a 5 minutes break and reconvene in 5 minutes. Get some coffee, tea, water, and get back in time for the last part. Okay, if whenever you are ready, just give a sign that you are back. Okay, I see there are fewer colleagues left, but we keep going. If you are ready, just give a sign and we will continue. Mm-hmm. Okay, maybe we'll just wait for 1 more minute. Benjamin, Kyril, Puroy, give us a sign or a thumbs up if we can, if we are good to continue.
Yes, I'm here already.
Okay, super, thanks much. Okay. It may take longer for others to do their coffee. I was thinking about myself, making a coffee. It's still early here, but the machine takes long, to clean up and then to go through the coffee making and takes forever. Okay. Puroy, Kyril, are we good to continue? Are you back? Super. Okay. So Nico, I think we are good to go. And I'm sure Kyril, I hope he's back. He's joining us.
Okay, shall we move on then?
Yes, I think we can move on.
Right. I will share my screen.
Okay.
Well, I will start here. So in this section, we are going to be doing a review of the expert survey and the structure of the indicators that researcher will have to fill in the survey tool. The survey tool is going to be available online. It's a sole working instrument where everything the research phase will happen there. The answers will require desktop research and interview to key actors. All the answers require justifications. All justifications require evidence. And the study period covers activities, observations, and evidence between May 1st, 2019 and May 1st, 2021. So in the next slides, I will talk about a little bit about the structure of the indicators, because all the indicators share a same structure. And it's useful to have this structure in mind when reviewing the work of the researchers. So all the indicators have a main question that begins with, to what extent something happened in the country. And this main question of the indicator is not directly answered. The the score that the country is going to get there is calculated on top of the answers of the sub-questions of the indicator. So you don't answer the first question, but then you have sub-questions, and these sub-questions are split in different parts of the indicators that are the existence sub-questions, the element sub-questions, and the extent sub-question. The existence component may be 1 or 2 questions. The element questions are statements that could be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or more elements. And then in the extent sub-question, we have 1 or 2 sub-questions per indicator. So we had said that there are 39 indicators throughout the whole survey. And every indicator is split in sub-questions. That is what actually the researcher is going to answer. And it has 3 parts. The existence part, it checks where the frameworks for and provisions in the governance indicators or the data exists in availability indicators. Then the elements is where we get the information about the particularities and the characteristics of this policy or this data set or this capability that was observed in the reality. And the extent is are the sub-questions where we check if what is evaluated demonstrates comprehensive coverage or some limitations. So we have, if the policy of a data set exists, we have the elements where we explore some particularities, and the extent, that is how comprehensive is this data set of this policy. So just for a quick review, for the existence sub-questions are very important, the definition and identifications that are going to be there, so the researchers know if what is needed is found there. And there in the handbook, they will have instructions how to identify the best example. And that idea that we have discussed before, that this study design was built to address different government ways of organization. So first, they are going to look for a national level example, but if there is no national level example, still they can assess, in the existence and in the next questions, they can assess a subnational example, and then in the extent sub-question, they will be able to express if it is an outlier or if it is a general practice in the country. So these are the main important things in the existence sub-questions. So this is one example. We have picked up of the governance pillar, but all of the pillars have this existence question. So the first one is the question of the indicator that asks, to what extent do relevant laws, regulation, policies, and guidance provide a basis for collecting and publishing structured beneficial ownership data on companies? So this question is not directly addressed. So they are the existence of question in the first stage. So in this case, there are 2 existence of question that they are repeated in all the thematic modules that have a governance question. And in the first part, it's asked whether there is any law, regulation, or policy requiring the collection or publication of this information in any form. And in the second question, ask if there is some regulation or law or policies that discuss the publication of open data. And with these 2 sub-questions, we form the existence element part of this indicator. Then we go to the elements. So once we have identified that the law, the regulation, or the data set is available, or the evidence of the use is there, then we start with the researcher have to look at it, have to look closer at those documents or those data sets, and have to answer to these statements that we are going to make with no, with partially, or yes. In this case, it's very important the justification that researchers give to the partially answer, because it's a way to know more why did they choose partially. In some indicators, in some sub-questions, the guidance says when you have to assess yes and when partially, but in others, because before going to the field, you can't know what can happen with the phenomena, we leave it to the criteria of the researchers. So for example, if we look at the left side of the screen, we continue with this example of the governance indicator that we read in the first slide. And we have that the elements are grouped. You know, these bolded titles are the grouping that the elements belong. I have not pasted all the elements here because they are a lot, but to know that they belong to different groups. For example, there is a reusable group that is called provision for data quality, and the statement is the framework requires a verification process, no partially yes. And with the availability indicators, the structure is really similar. It's to get more information about the data set. And that information is grouped in clusters of elements. So, and then we have the last part of indicator that is the extent sub-question. So it's to explore the comprehensive of the coverage and the limitations. Generally, this coverage assessment is focused on geographic coverage or institutional coverage, or in the use and impact indicators could be in the amount of evidence or impact that was observed. So one example could be how widely do these laws, regulation, policies, or guidance apply. When it refers to those laws, it refers to the ones that the researcher mentioned that exist at the beginning and that were assessed. And so the top score would be they cover the majority of the companies in the country in the case of company information, and the lowest one would be that they cover just a limited number of localities or companies. And with the availability indicators, they have a very, very similar shape. So, so far it's clear more or less the structure of the indicators and what's the objective of each of them.
I don't see questions.
Let's say,
yeah, let's say yes. Clear.
Yeah.
Khairil, are you a little bit confused? Yeah, okay, no, all clear. Okay.
And during the piloting that we made of some indicators, there was some concerns that I think was useful to address here. That was, what do we do if there is fragmented evidence? What do we call fragmented evidence? Perhaps there is the policies or the law that apply to a situation that we are tracking, there are multiple laws. Or we are looking for the availability of data on some issue, and that data is spread between different agencies or different places, and researchers don't know how to assess that. So there will be a general guidance on fragmented evidence in the research handbook, so it will be there. But now I would like to give you an example. The general sense is for the existence question to collect all the information and respond it with all the fragmented evidence. Also, for the element that are asking of what data is available, for example, answer with the whole bunch of data available, but then when you have to assess particularities of a data set, you can pick the most comprehensive and most complete one, because otherwise it won't be possible to assess all the data sets. I brought here an example. For example, the indicator on land tenure data that asks to what extent does the land tenure data exist as open data in the country. And there was a country that has, for one side, a data set that contains information in private owned land. Then there is another data set that contains information on state-owned land. And there is another one that contains information about mining concession that was from a different agency. So researchers didn't know very well how to handle with this. And the idea would be like this. You get the whole data set, you answer in the existence question, yes, this data is online. And then when you say, when it's the turn of kind of data, for example, you say here, state land, yes. Mining concessions, yes. Open access, no. Communal lands, no. And then when it comes to this assessment of the openings and the timing of the data sets, if you would have to assess if they are different in these characteristics, you couldn't assess all of them. So you have to pick the most complete and comprehensive one. For example, if there is a country that has much more private-owned land than state-owned land, perhaps it would be better to assess the one that is more comprehensive and complete of the reality. But don't worry, these cases are described also in the research handbook, so we know how to address this. And then, if you would like, David, you would like to take this slide, and then we go to the survey tool.
Yes, Nico, thank you. So this is the case when the data is available, but it's not available online. It's only available offline. So if that's the case, we have the existence question at the beginning, right? Asking whether the data is available online in any form. And you see you have the option there where you can select that the data is not available online. So this implies the idea that it is available but not available online. So when you select that, when you select that, then you have the extra information that you can be providing. If you are capable, let's say, and this is good to orientate the researchers. If the researchers are capable of answering some of the questions based on the, let's say, general descriptions or the description of what the data set contains online, then it's valuable for the researchers to try to answer some of the questions, of the specific questions. But researchers would not need to go to the offices to request for this data, right? So if the data is not available and if there no information is available at all, then the responses they should answer all those questions with no, as the information is not available. But if they're capable of answering some of the questions based on this general information available, then it will be valuable to try to address them as possible. Yeah, but I think that's it, right, Nico?
Yeah. Then I would like to share with you a little bit more of the survey tool that we have been exploring before, but more in detail of which are the most important parts of it and how can you use it. So here you have at the beginning a research status, and then regarding the last question, this is going to be shown then the control sheet. So the researcher can set the status, not started, draft, complete, or reviewed. This is going to be used by the reviewer, but this is to have a sense of where is it. Then the confidence, it's to express how confident is about the answer. This is also important to know if it's very sure about what is answering or not. And for the reviewer to know what is the sense of the researcher. Then we have here further question guidance. That is the very important button. You press there, and there the survey tools brings you the context and more information on this indicator. And what is the two main content here is the definitions and identifications, where we identify the data set or the governance that we are looking for. So what we are assessing has to match with the definitions here. And then in the research guidance, we have built some tips and some useful starting points where you could start looking for in every country. And also some clarifications on some of the sub-questions. And then we also have the indicators justification, that is to give more context on why these indicators were chosen. So then you can close it, but you always have to go back there. Then here you can see with the different background is the research journal. That is what David was mentioning, that this is not going to be published anywhere. So it's for the researcher to express step by step how they have developed the research. This is very important also for the question where there is no evidence, so they can tell to the reviewer which steps they took to find it, but they couldn't find it. So this is the, as we have spoken, this is the existence question. You have the possible answers, and then you have different supporting questions there that you have to provide URLs or more evidence. Here you can click and you can add notes to exchange with the reviewer or the coordinator, or a note for yourself for the future. Then we have elements, no? From existence, we come from elements, and now we have the groups, name of the groups of the elements, and we have the statements that we have to ask, no, answer no, partially, or yes. Always the same, we have boxes to provide more evidence, etc. And all of them has to be answered with no, partially, or yes. Here, the first column is when it's not started yet. It's not a null, it's not a blank, it's not started. So they cannot stay here after we close the survey. And then at the bottom, we have two more boxes. One is the justification box that yes, is the most important one. It is going to be published along with the results and the scores that was assigned here. And also in the research handbook, you will find detailed instructions on how to complete the justification box and how to cite the references. So that's detailed there. And this supporting evidence is a space where researchers can upload the most important evidence, and we are going to keep it in a structured way here with you can add a file or a web link, you provide a title, and also provide the URL or the resource. So that is saved along with all the responses. So, well, those were the most important, like a quick review in the survey tool, and the pieces where you can interact and researchers can interact with reviewers, coordinators, etc. And well, that was for this part of the call. Is it clear how the survey tool works and how the indicators are built with different parts and what's expected to happen there?
Veronica, you're on mute.
Okay. Benjamin, any questions, any comments? I see Puroi nodding positively. Yes, it's all clear, Puroi. If you have any comments or reactions or reflections on, you know, any of the processes or any of the stages, and please feel free to share those. Okay. Good. I think this takes us to the final part. And I said earlier when we kicked off the session that the administrivia part will be left for the final part of the session. So basically, what's next? We have to do our best to finalize the research recruitment process. I know that some of the hubs are really well ahead, almost signing contracts. Some have already completed this process. I'm not sure what is the situation on your end, Kyril, Puroi, if you could briefly update us on where you are with your processes.
I just reviewed all of the CVs. There really weren't that many standout candidates, unfortunately, so that's going to be an issue. Mm-hmm. And it's yet to be seen if they'll accept offers, because we're so behind. Well, I think we sent out the notice for the researchers in January and we're in May, so it's yet to be seen. So we will finalize hopefully that process by the end of the month. Mm-hmm. and get going. We'll probably have to schedule a separate call with you to look at a strategy for those countries where we really had a poor selection pool. in some cases, I wanted to also ask, there was only 1 or 2 candidates that applied for a specific country. And I mean, in Malaysia's case, there was only 1 standout candidate, so that's fine. But in the other cases, both, you know, is it a conflict of interest, or is it a problem for your HR reporting? I know for us, if we only get 2 candidates for a position, we re-advertise and re-advertise until we get a better pool. I don't know what the policy is on the GDB about that.
I don't think that we have insisted that for every single country we have necessarily 2 good candidates or more than 1 candidate. Of course, that would be ideal, so that you really have a selection process in place. But there are case situations when researchers can be approached directly. So, you know, for example, if someone working on data in a specific country, you know about the, you know, some of the work that was been done by the researcher. You know him or her from some previous engagement, so probably there is no point in wasting time, but just go directly to and approach the researcher and see whether he or she is interested. But absolutely, let us know if you need any support on that front. I am fully aware of the fact that, yes, researchers have been approached early in the year. Some of the hubs have even recruited those at the end of last year. We really apologize for whatever inconveniences we generated with this changes in the project, but let's try to see what are the best modalities in moving forward. So absolutely, if there is a need to convene a call, let's convene a call and discuss specifically what are the countries that you know have struggles with in terms of defining who is best fit, whether you have someone really qualified for that role. If not, let's look for solutions for those specific countries, maybe through more direct outreach, and we stand to provide support on that.
And you guys don't, I mean, you guys don't specifically need oversight on the contracting process, because we have.
No, okay. I think you are good to go with if you have only 1 candidate for the country and is a good candidate, you know that he or she meets the minimum criteria, that should be fine. And once you identified, of course, to be on a safe side, because of the robustness of the barometer, of the methodology, the conflict of interest, the declaration form, it's something that we would highly, strongly encourage all the hubs to sign those with researchers. I think, and one additional piece that is really important, once you have identified the researchers for each and every single country, one of the tasks, and this is related to the government survey. So one of the tasks would be to ask the researcher to identify who is the point of contact in that respective government for that country that could receive the expert survey, the government survey, the GDB government survey. It can be, in some countries, you know well, there are open data coordinators, there is a chief information officer, ICT 4D. So there are different agencies you would know best, or your researchers would know best. So what we would like to have in place is by June 14th to have names and contact details of these POCs. To the extent possible. We are not expecting to have 100 plus government surveys being filled in, but we would certainly aim to have as many government surveys completed for the countries participating in the GDB's pilot edition as possible. Okay, so that's another piece.
Veronica, did you send the contract for the declaration of conflict of interest, or is that on a file somewhere?
It's all on the Google site, including the TOR. So if you go, I will share as a result of today's call. I will get back to to you all with those relevant links. So you just copy paste it. You just download it from the Google site. So it's
Okay.
there. I can send it as an attachment to the message if easier, so that you don't need to look for it.
I didn't see it, so I just drafted up the contract, so I didn't see it at the time. So if you could point me, that would be great.
Everything is on the Google site. So you have the TOR for the researcher, something you can use for finalizing your contracts. The conflict of interest form is also there. So yes, I will immediately share all this once again after the call. Maybe they just got lost through the several emails that came through the mailing list. No worries. In terms of the capacity building sessions with the national researchers, so of course we would love to start the data collection phase as soon as possible. We are aware that you would need at least half a month to finalize all the processes and conduct those capacity building sessions, either one or maybe two. It depends, of course, on how you want to organize that. You have 14 countries on your list, or 13. I think Myanmar dropping, you still have 13 researchers to train, and we will provide, as we shared, we will provide as much guidance and support as possible. So from the way to organize the session, to the content, slide decks, anything that helps you in explaining the researchers, all the expectations and requirements for each stage of the process. So we will be getting back to you, and all those materials will also be shared through the Google site. So there will be a capacity building rubric on the Google site with all the materials. And of course, you can always go back and watch the video recordings of the sessions that we are conducting. So that's another piece. There, where we have hubs that coordinate across a bigger number of researchers, we encourage to set up those communication platforms. I think David mentioned earlier, the WhatsApp, or maybe the Telegram, or maybe a Google group, a mailing list, anything that will help you keep in touch with your researchers and inform them on a regular basis about the updates, about the requirements, reminders, deadlines, and so on. So we strongly encourage that you set up that sort of communication platform, and it's really up to you to decide what works best. Most important is that no one is left behind. I mean, your researchers, and you don't end up, having situations when you have to memorize the email by heart and look for it somewhere in the documents and insert it when you want to send out a message. So that's just for the effectiveness and efficiency of the processes. And there, where because we have MOUs with OD4D hubs, I will get back to you with the timeline extended. So the timeline will be adjusted again for your internal bookkeeping processes, for audits, for any internal organizational related matters. We will slightly adjust the timeline, so basically adjust it to the current timeline, but extension of those MOUs are at no cost. So you will still receive the funding that is included in the MOU, but extension is done at no cost. That's very brief on the next steps, but we stand ready to connect separately, directly, convene calls on any of the matters, and please feel free to also reach out to us directly as often as it's needed, so that by mid-June we are all good to start the data collection. And one of the last pieces for today, and I will stop sharing the screen before I let you leave the room, and we have 3 of you. I think I would still like to hear your immediate takeaways from today's conversation. We started with this idea of what are the top ingredients for successful data collection. Now that you know, what are the implications? What does it take? What are the step-by-step implications for that process? I mean, do you feel like you are going to meet the the expectations successfully. The data collection process will be completed successfully. And do you see or foresee any challenges, again, given the journey that needs to be undertaken for the next 3 months? What's your kind of immediate reflection and takeaway on that? Is it still possible? Will it be successful? And how to make it successful in order to overcome the whatever challenges you may feel at the moment as still being there?
I don't know from Kirill's perspective, but considering that we had a regional coordinator who went on maternity leave unexpectedly, for us it's going to be resource.
Okay.
Yeah, because she's a whole person. and Kirill and I did not have the time to cover a whole person's position on this. So that will be our biggest challenge.
Okay, but Mia is not expected to reconnect and re-engage soon because the baby...
She just had the baby, so she's back in August, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
So she'll miss a lot of the data collection process. Okay. So that's why I invited Manali, because I was hoping that she could be another resource person for us to help coordinate, because we're, as you mentioned, we are trying to ambitiously cover 13 countries. So so I did bring Manali in as an additional resource person, but again, I'm not really sure how much time she will be able to allocate to it.
Mm-hmm. And in her case, if you need us to sit with her and take her through, the project and what is it all like, and share a bit more about the GDB so she feels more confident about it, happy to do that. A little bit of more intros into the GDB, about the background. Sometimes, people miss those pieces and they don't feel the connection between their new role, their new job, or expectation, and the project they're part of. So I'm really happy to have a session with her if that would be helpful, and guide her along the way. So I would be happy to provide that additional support to her as GDB.
Thanks. I'm not sure that she's going to volunteer herself after this meeting. Kirill, I'm not sure how you're feeling.
Mm-hmm. No, I've been through the process before, which is why I'm interested in those dashboards. Even as a researcher, it's after doing it for 2 weeks, right, and so many indicators, to just have I like the things that confidence, completed, not completed, and so on. Even on an individual level as a researcher, it was really hard to know how far have filled out all those indicators. So on the UI side, to know oh, you're missing this part, or that's going to be really helpful. And then on the regional side, it's again really helpful for us to just quickly see a quick overview, like Peru says. We have we might be doing 10 to 13 countries. To quickly give a quick overview of which countries are in trouble or which researchers are behind, and so on. So that would be really helpful for us, having those tools. Yeah.
Okay, I'm not sure what Nico's immediate reaction is on that, but that's certainly something we need to consider. Mm-hmm. But I'm sure he's already embedded in the processes, right, Nico?
Yes. You have a sense of the advance of how they are responding the indicators. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, super. I see a comment from Benjamin. Benjamin, do you want to open up your mic and share?
Oh yes. That's the question, is about communications during the research, the data collection process. So if we found some issues, I'm not sure how to define this question or something else. Just probably stop there, and I want to flag this and bring this question to the GDB team for clarification if it's helpful. So is there any mechanism for us to do that, or we just send an email to Nico, David, or we can just flag on the tool, and then you can see that. So that's my question.
Thank you. Nico, David, you've seen the question in the chat as well.
I think an email would work well, and you can point at certain survey question, etc., and we can check there. But yeah, an email should work.
Yeah, I think email is the first immediate communication tool to use whenever you find any issues or you come across something that you don't know how to address. So absolutely feel free to reach out to any of us. I think it's important. I will share with everyone the email addresses of the core team members, so you have all the email addresses in one place. Maybe just also place them on the Google site. Yes, we'll see about modalities in which to make it easier for you. If there are no other questions or comments, I think we would really appreciate you taking 5 minutes to go through this evaluation form and just quickly share with us, and give us a sense of how clear things have been shared today, how clear it is for you, what are the implications for each of the stages that you have to go through. And apart from that, thank you really all very much for taking your time. As I said, we are taking a lot of, it's also a learning process for us. We are also adjusting and improving each and every single session, because as we say, there is no right or wrong. There are testings and pilotings and trying out different approaches. So we are learning as much as you do in terms of what may work and what is the best approach. I think after today's week, we will have a better sense of how to guide you in planning for those capacity building sessions for your researchers. So we would know exactly where, which part of the capacity building session would require how much time and so on, and what is the kind of contents that you would need to run those smoothly. So with this, it would be fantastic if you share the comments right away, as you are still fresh from the call. And we keep in touch, and please feel free to reach out for any additional session or any additional call, any additional conversation. And I will get back with all those details once again, the conflict of interest, the TOR, and all those things that you need for the recruitment process. David, Nico, have a good night. I know it's already so late on your end. Rest well, and see you later in the day. Roy, Benjamin, Kyril, thank you so much for staying with us. And yes, fingers crossed, we will make it with reciprocal support. It has to work, so we will make it work. Thank you all, and
thank you. Bye bye.
Of the day. Bye bye.